And we're on. Al Kavadlo, thanks for being on Fitness and Consciousness.
Hey, what's up, Ryan? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've known about you for quite some time, I guess. I think through like the Dragon Door books and somewhere along studying Pavel Satulin, you popped up. So I was looking through a lot of your like social media and your website, and I see like a lot of what you're doing now, but I'm not seeing a lot of your history. Like, where did you like come from, and how did you get into all that you're doing? I mean, I'm familiar with like the books you've been in and all that, but like, what was your start? What was your beginning into the world of
So
fitness?
I first got started, I think like a lot of young guys, I got started in strength training as a teenager because I was a skinny kid and I wanted to try to put on some muscle.
Mhm.
So I got into, in the beginning, just doing push-ups and pull-ups, not because I was into calisthenics necessarily, but I didn't really have any other options. I didn't have a gym membership. I didn't have any weights, but I got a chin-up bar for my 13th birthday.
Oh,
I started
cool.
messing around with that. And when I got to high school, I started taking weight training and learning more about, curls and bench presses and a lot of the conventional stuff that people were doing. And wasn't really that concerned with working my legs yet at the time because I think like a lot of teenagers, it was just all about wanting to have abs and arms.
The mirror doesn't go down that far.
Right, exactly. And I wear pants most of the time anyway, so who cares about legs, right? But by the time I got to college, I discovered squats and deadlifts and was starting to get a little bit more serious about my training. And then after college, I got started in the fitness industry when I was 23. As you know, my very first job was just what they call fitness floor manager,
Hmm.
which is really just like a glorified towel boy, just
Yeah.
picking things up off the floor, keeping it looking neat and clean and helping members out with whatever they might need. And then eventually I got promoted to being a trainer, and I did personal training just in the big box Globo gym world for a lot of years. And around, about almost 10 years ago now, I started putting some videos on YouTube and started a blog. And then little by little, things grew out of that. And then it was in 2011 is when I got started with my association with Dragon Door and the combat conditioning brand, because the author of the combat conditioning book, Coach Paul Wade, he had seen me online and thought I had the right kind of look and knew that I could do a lot of these body weight moves that he wanted to have modeled in the book. He reached out to me, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
That's the condensed version. That's like 10 years or actually like 25 years in a couple of minutes, but we can extrapolate on that as need be.
Yeah. So the convict conditioning, I've read the first one, and I see you have like the picture of the second one up on
You can
your.
see it right over there. Right?
Yeah. And it's really good with progressions, and it has like the um, kind of like a story to it, which I've heard may or may not actually be real, but
We'll never know for sure, but
yeah, and which who cares if it's
if
the
it
progression.
motivates people, right? That's what I always say.
Yeah, Star Wars isn't true either, but people seem to like it.
Yeah.
Anyways, the progressions are really good, starting from like you've never done this before, you can't even hardly do a push up. Here's your progression to um, body weight mastery. So can you maybe just like talk about like how these like progressions can work? Like how can you, because like some of this stuff it might look like if it's your first day, like I'll never be able to do this stuff.
For
What's
sure. Well, with weight training, it's very simple to start an exercise with a light weight. And gradually over time, you work towards adding more and more weight. And suddenly you're lifting a lot more than you were in the beginning, but the movement pattern more or less stays the same. And in calisthenics, it's a little bit different because rather than adding or changing our weight, we mess with the leverage by either offsetting contact points, maybe completely taking a contact point away, like going from a one-arm push-up, rather from a two-arm push-up to a one-arm push-up. But then there's transitional methods where, one arm isn't doing as much as the other, like a self-assist sort of thing. And, we can mess with the range of motion, do a partial range of motion at first and gradually work toward a bigger range of motion. So there's a lot of different little ways that we can mess with these things. And I think what was so groundbreaking about that original cognitive conditioning book is, as far as I'm aware, it was the first time that whole idea was ever really introduced in print. And prior to that, I had never really considered the idea that calisthenics could be progressively approached in that fashion by changing the exercise and messing with the leverage. And now that's a concept that I've really run with for the last bunch of years myself, and have been enjoying seeing how many different ways there are to chase these various progressions.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can, like, maybe we watch Olympics once every 4 years and see the gymnasts, and like, how do they do that? Were they just born being able to like do 17 backflips in a row? And but like so it's like, maybe it was like kind of like not in print. It's like you're saying, like, because there didn't seem to be a lot of, or maybe any real starting from zero to mastery things. And a lot of them kind of look, or like maybe like yoga is taken from that, like a lot of what you would see, and like more like body weight strength classes are creeping into like the yoga movement.
There's definitely a lot of overlap between these different disciplines, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, yoga, it's just another style of body weight training, right? It's just the emphasis is a little bit less on strength, a little bit more on the flexibility, but there's certainly a lot of strength elements to yoga. And calisthenics definitely has a flexibility and a body awareness component to it as well. I meet a lot of guys, and this was the case for myself when I first started getting more and more into calisthenics, who are really strong at certain lifts, but then you take them out of their comfort zone and they are a complete beginner again. So it can be a frustrating thing, but it can also be a really great opportunity to reevaluate your strengths and weaknesses and hopefully work towards growth. I mean, that's what it was for me in the beginning. When I first discovered some of this calisthenic stuff, I went in very cocky, like, I got this, I'm strong. And it was like, whoa, I need to work on some of this stuff. I'm not as fit as I thought.
Yeah, there's some funny videos of like the big power lifter dudes. They go to a yoga class and they're just sweating and struggling.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then these 40-year-old women at least they don't look like they're having any kind of problem with it. They're able to have like a smile on their face and stuff. And these big, strong dudes are really having a hard time in there.
Yeah, you get good at the stuff you practice. So it's good to practice different things so you can be well-rounded.
Yeah, and like some people will, 'cause you're still doing like weight training, right? You still do stuff with weights. You pretty much just.
I don't do any weight training at all anymore. I've been pretty much all calisthenics for a while now.
Yeah, that's.
And even within the world of calisthenics, there's so much to explore, and that's kind of what led me to put away weight training. It wasn't like one day I woke up and was just like, aha, I'm only going to do calisthenics. It was just this very gradual, certain things coming into my program and other things having to go out to make room for them. And as I started discovering all these new calisthenics exercises that I wanted to improve at, it was like, wow, if I want to prioritize this stuff, I can't also be doing all that other stuff too, or I'm just not going to get anywhere with any of that. Mm-hmm. So it just, I don't know if I chose calisthenics or if it chose me, but it was just this sort of gradual thing that happened. And one day I woke up and it's like, oh, yeah, this is all I'm doing now, and I love it.
Yeah, and you're like one of the big go-to guys for this kind of training. Something that I was thinking about before was like, everybody has their own thing. Some people like to play basketball or tennis or whatever, but mm-hmm. I was thinking like, okay, if I need somebody to help me carry this big couch up the stairs, and I see like the guy at the gym, like, okay, I'm gonna ask some guy at the gym to help me carry this couch upstairs and give him $50 for effort or whatever. So, and then there's the guy that's deadlifting 500 pounds, and then there's the guy that's doing all the like interesting calisthenics stuff. He's doing like the one-arm push-ups. Have you seen, I guess my point is, like, have you seen any like negative effect to like not lifting the weights? Like when you do go to help your buddy carry his couch upstairs, you're like, man, maybe I should start doing some weightlifting or
two things. First, the guy I want carrying my couch is the guy who's carried a lot of couches, because he's going to have the best technique. He's going to know the angles to turn at, and he's going to just have the experience, regardless of how strong he is. Beyond that, I find calisthenics has really good carryover toward all strength pursuits. I was saying before how I felt like when I got into calisthenics, I felt like some of the strength that I built in the weight room didn't carry over as well as I thought it might. But I find that the opposite is a better transaction. So people who get really strong with body weight, once they can learn the technique on a lift, which might take a little bit of practice depending on what lift it is and how technical it is, the strength will come much faster than the other way around. Because the strength you build from calisthenics is always going to be relative to your own body weight. So it kind of keeps you very honest. Whereas in the weight room, you get these guys who sometimes can lift a lot, but they have a lot more body fat than they are maybe willing to acknowledge.
Yeah.
And that gives them better leverage to lift an external weight. But when you're dealing with your own body weight as resistance, any superfluous fat you're carrying is just going to make it harder and weigh you down. So body weight training makes you super efficient, and it makes you pound for pound really, really strong.
Yeah, maybe it's kind of like getting into like into the weeds a little bit, but there's like some people will say, if you're lifting a weight, then you focus on like the technique of lifting the weight, or you can focus on like your technique. So you're just looking at your body and your mind. And so like when you're doing a deadlift, maybe like some people are thinking about like moving the weight, and some people are thinking of like moving their body perfectly through this range. So like when you're doing your calisthenics, like what's your mindset? Like what is your like internal focus?
That's a good question. And I always try to be as focused as possible on what I'm doing. I get so frustrated by the whole gym culture of people like watching TVs while they're on this mindless elliptical trainer. It's like, no, you want to really be present for it. And that's how you're going to get better at it. And I mean, a lot of the stuff I'm into, you can't be watching TV while you're trying to do a handstand or a pistol squat or something like that. I very much like to focus on both of the things that you mentioned, the specifics of the movement pattern and the technical things that are involved, and also being aware of what muscles I'm feeling. And I'm a big believer with a lot of the calisthenic stuff and trying to be as unified with your whole body as you can. And I think that's true on a lot of kettlebell stuff and a lot of barbell stuff too. It's not really isolation in the sense of like a bicep curl or a leg extension. You really want to have the whole body functioning as one cohesive unit. And that takes a lot of focus.
Right. I was just watching it a little bit ago. Forget the technique of it now. The fly baby, or what's that? Air baby.
The one arm balance with the elbow on the knee.
Yeah. And you were talking about how like so at first, if somebody doesn't know, they're like, oh, you need really strong arms for that, or you need strong wrists, which may be true, but like there's more to it than that. You're talking about the obliques and the leg that's up in the air. Can you like maybe kind of describe what it takes to put together a technique, like maybe using that one as an example? Because that one looks really cool.
Yeah, that's a very advanced skill. So for anyone listening who's not sure what exactly we're talking about, you could Google air baby and you'll see an image. But basically, it's an isometric hold where you're balancing on one hand your entire body weight, and the way that you do it is you have your knee balanced on your elbow, and then your arm and your leg are outstretched in the opposite directions. And it's one of those things that, like you said, it takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of wrist strength. But it takes a great deal of body awareness and that total body harmony. And there's a lot of oblique, there's a lot of lat and shoulder, and there's a lot of mental awareness of where everything is relative to one another. So some of these skills, especially that one, it just takes a lot of time and patience to get the hang of it. And a lot of the time I like to remind people, because people come into this a lot of time with a very conventional mindset about, well, how many reps should I do? How many sets should I do? How long should I rest between each set? And that stuff is definitely has a time and place where it's worthwhile. But sometimes when you're working on a skill like that, or a lot of these hand balancing skills, it's better not to necessarily think of it that way and just spend as much time as you can until you're really fatigued practicing the move, and rest and try it again, and really just try to pay attention to what you're doing rather than counting how long you're holding it for. Just trying to really, really be present for the skill. And what I love about that is at the end of it, you get a good workout. You're going to be sweating. You're going to get muscle fatigue. You're going to come back stronger. But you're also going to learn a new skill and a better way to move your body, or a different way to move your body, which I find very rewarding.
Yeah. Are you, so if somebody hasn't done that one before, like, do you recommend try it like your right side first? Just spend the first few days or whatever that you're trying it, just trying to do your right side, or you like try it on your right then left, or do you have?
I generally encourage people to try to stay as balanced as possible, because there's this tendency a lot. If you have a stronger side, it's like, I just want to keep practicing on my stronger side because it's more encouraging. Mm-hmm. But then you can, create an imbalance or an overuse sort of thing. So you definitely want to try to practice this stuff evenly. But, back to what you were mentioning before about this whole progressive nature, a move like an air baby, I wouldn't even have somebody try that until they've already gotten the hang of some other more fundamental skills, like a crow pose. And, I'd make sure that they were pretty solid on basic push-ups and pull-ups before I had them mess with something like that, just to make sure that their foundational strength is there. Because a lot of time people want to try a move because they saw it on YouTube and like, wow, that looks really cool. I want to try that. And it's like, you're not ready to try that yet. Mm-hmm. It's like you can't do a deadlift with 500 pounds until you could do a deadlift with 300 pounds. So if you don't have the 300-pound deadlift, trying that 500-pound deadlift, it ain't going to happen, and it's not going to really benefit you. You're just going to stand there pulling on a bar and nothing's moving.
Mm-hmm. And when you're doing these progressions, like, so you can already do the technique, but say you're going to practice them today, are you going to like start off doing crow, then one arm crow or one leg crow?
Yeah, it's to use the weight training analogy again. It's like you wouldn't go in and do your working set without a little bit of a warm up. You might do a lighter weight, or just the bar first just to get the blood flowing, then put a little more weight on, and then work up to your working sets. So yeah, I absolutely use earlier progressions to kind of keep myself up before I go for harder stuff. And I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of the time people think, oh, when you get more advanced, you don't need to worry about push-ups anymore. You don't need to worry about pull-ups. But I still do those things in my workout, because if I jump right in and try to do a one-arm pull-up and I'm not warmed up, it's not going to end well.
Yeah, there is something fascinating about the progressions inside of the same in one session. And I started as a trainer about the same age as you. I was 20. This was in 1999, and I was doing jiu-jitsu before that. And a lot of our warm-up looked like yoga stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's something about, and like when I take like yoga classes now, or like whether it's in person or online, there's something fascinating about these progressions. And of course, it's like, it's not a new concept to me, but like there's something that's like getting like deeper and deeper. And like one of my friends, she teaches, and she has like a real cool way of setting up her class. And like I was doing like a hand balancing thing on like Gaia. It's this subscription you can get. It's like $10 a month, and it has like documentaries, but also tons of yoga classes to follow along with. And there was one on hand balancing that was like stuff that some of it I hadn't done before. And so I'm like going through all this like progressions, and some of it's just like super easy stuff. And she's like leading this huge class at some festival. And then I find myself doing things that I've never done before the very first time I try them. And it's just about these, like how it sets up, like block by block by block, make sure this is like stretched out, make sure this is, activated, and on, and one leads to the next. So can you maybe describe like what a session with you would look like from like maybe someone that's kind of like me? I'm, I guess fairly advanced, depending on who you compare me to.
It's a big spectrum, right?
Yeah. So maybe like I come to you, you know that I'm a strong first instructor and all this, so I don't have to start off with the absolute beginner. But like, what does that look like? I want to be able to like just do some more cool stuff. What does it?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the time when I work with new clients, especially if they already have a fairly extensive background and they're pretty fit, I ask them what they want to work on, because there aren't necessarily things that you have to do, but it's what the person is interested in and what they enjoy. If someone wants to learn handstands and hand balancing, I love teaching that stuff. But if it doesn't particularly interest somebody, it's not like not being able to do a handstand is going to prevent you from being fit if handstands have nothing to do with your goals. So a lot of time people seek me out because they have specific skills that they've seen me do that they want to learn, whether it's a muscle up or a human flag or a pistol squat or a handstand. So I just ask people what skills they want to work on. And then I, start them with basic progressions toward that skill and see how they handle those. And sometimes I'm able to see a weak link or an area that needs work from observing them practice some of these basics. Other times I see, okay, this person has a really solid foundation. Now I can safely assume they're ready to try something a little harder. And then we gradually work on harder and harder progressions until we find that one that is right at the fringes of what they're capable of. And then we want to just milk that for what we can. And then if eventually, you get too fatigued and you're not getting anything out of it anymore, and then we'll switch gears and work on a different skill. So much of it just comes down to what the individual person wants to work on. But I think as a trainer, it's so important to be able to observe and improvise based on what someone is really capable of. Because sometimes people come in and they have a misconception. They think, oh, I'm really, really fit. And then you see them moving like this person's a mess. And other times people come in and they're so humble and hard on themselves, like, oh, I'm such a beginner, I suck. And you watch them move and you're like, actually, this person's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, you touched on something that I was going to ask you about. It's that line between like, I have done this and I have not done this next step yet. And how much like time do we spend on the thing that I'm like trying to do, but I keep failing.
Yeah.
Like, and you I guess like how much time is spent on that fringe that you're
well, I generally try to find the point where the person isn't failing, or at least isn't failing on most of their attempts. Because if someone's just can't do the thing, it's like I was saying before about it. Well, if you can't do a 300-pound deadlift and you try to deadlift 500, it ain't going to happen. Mm-hmm. So if I can see that someone is just not capable of doing something yet, I'll scale it back and find something that they can do. And right when their form starts to break down on whatever that is, then it's like, okay, let's just shift gears and do something else. A good example of this is maybe if someone's goal is to do a muscle up and they can only do 7 or 8 pull-ups. I'm not going to have them try a muscle up yet because they're not strong enough, but we're going to work on their pull-ups a lot. And maybe on their first set, they can do, like I said, 7 or 8. By their second set, they're fatigued, they get 5 or 6. By the third set, maybe it's only 3 or 4. Maybe I'll have them do one more set of 3 or 4. And then it's like, all right, let's move on. And then, when we come back next week, gradually their pull-ups go up. And once they get to the point where that first set is 11, 12 reps, it's like, okay, now we can start trying some more of that muscle-up specific progressions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, it is that kind of a fine line between, we want to learn, which there's that uncomfortable spot, but we don't want to be like so frustrated that like, if I can't do a backflip, I don't want to just land on my head
exactly
over and over and over again. And
it's much more encouraging to be able to do something, even if that something is a regressed version of your ultimate goal, than to just keep trying the thing and failing again and again. And ultimately, that's how you're going to get to the goal, because you're going to develop the strength and the skill from that earlier progression that you can't develop from all these failed attempts at a harder thing.
Yeah, and for your own programming or your clients also, are you using like for your own clients, is it all body weight stuff also?
For the most part. But, at this point in my career, I'm fortunate enough that most of the people who train with me seek me out because they know that body weight is sort of my wheelhouse and that's what they want to learn. But occasionally I get a client who's just a referral from another client and they're not necessarily into calisthenics. They just want to get in better shape. And in those instances, if it's appropriate, I might throw a weight in their hand for a couple things. I'm not opposed to weight training. It definitely has a time and a place. But like I said, I've become so entrenched in this calisthenics world that I just want to spend all my time doing calisthenics because there's so much I want to explore in this modality. And there's only so much energy you have to train in a given day or a given week.
Yeah, there is. It just seems to kind of keep going on, and like it just like it never ends. Like, you know, I use gymnastics as an example. Like b-boy stuff is a great example too. You watch it from maybe even just like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but especially like you go back 20 years, you watch like the gymnastics from the 60s or something like that, and you watch what they're doing now. It's like, man, or like some guys will think they're doing like these hardcore workouts, and then they watch like 7-year-old gymnasts, like their training is like, oh, I guess.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at before. Everything exists on a spectrum, you know, but I really think that for the most part, those elite athletes, you know, those gymnasts, those Olympians, the professional athletes, they're really not a fair reference point for the general public. You know, if we compare ourselves to them, we're always going to feel like we're not good enough. That's like the financial equivalent of being like, oh, I'm not as rich as Bill Gates, so I'm a loser. Yeah. Like, there's some space in between being a loser and being Bill Gates. Just like there's some space in between being, you know, a 600-pound person who can't get off their couch and an Olympic medalist in gymnastics. There's a lot in between there. So I think it's healthy to keep perspective by knowing that you're never going to be the best and not letting yourself get too cocky. But it's also important to acknowledge, like, I mean, if you could do even 10 pull-ups, you're in the top percentage of even people who work out.
Yeah.
Just because there's someone who could do 50 doesn't mean your 10 isn't viable.
Right. Yeah, it can be. I guess depending on your mentality, it can be.
It can be encouraging or discouraging depending on how you choose to see it.
Yeah.
Everything is subjective and open to people's perspective like that. I find that continually fascinating, how two people will look at the same thing and take away completely different things from it based on their own internal projections.
Yeah. I'll teach like a martial arts class once a week, but then I go like train with my buddy, and it's like, man, should I even be teaching? Because he can beat me up so easily.
Sure.
But, like, you know, I mean, he outweighs me by 80 pounds, and like he's taller and all that.
You don't have to be the best in the world to teach something. Like this is something that I hear a lot from potential people who want to get into the training industry but feel insecure about it. And also I hear it from people, just haters online, like, you shouldn't be teaching this because there's someone out there who's better than you.
Yeah.
Well, can that person be the only teacher in the whole world who's allowed to teach this subject? You know, look at all the universities all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
You can't all be the best teachers, but a lot of them are having a positive impact. So if you have something to give and you have something to share and people want to learn from you, I think that's fantastic. And it's good to also be a student and continually try to better yourself and have teachers that you're learning from. But the idea that you can't teach until you're at a certain level, I mean, you need to be competent, but you certainly don't need to be the best person in the world to teach something. Sometimes the people who are the most skilled actually lack the ability to impart that knowledge on others. So teaching in itself is almost a separate thing from the performance.
Yeah, I've had that kind of feedback. There was like one guy who's like really good fighter, and my buddy was getting some lessons from him, but he was like telling me, so maybe this guy was maybe he could beat me up. But then my buddy that trained with him and trained with me, he was like, you're a lot better teacher than he is. Mm-hmm. I learned so much more from you. And so it's like, yeah, it can be kind of like a weird sort of thing. I know you're doing a lot with your brother, right? Mm-hmm. So like when you guys are together, like how much of your time are you spent like trying out like new skills and like giving like real time feedback? Oh, your leg is too far this way or that way, or like what do you do, I guess?
Yeah, so just to preface for anyone who's not familiar, my brother Danny is also a trainer, and he and we co-instruct a certification called the Progressive Calisthenics Certification. It's through Dragon Door Publications, and we've traveled all over the world teaching calisthenics and certifying people in progressive calisthenics. And we're really lucky that we get to do this, and we're lucky that we have each other to coach each other and to work out together. And yeah, it's really, really great because we can kind of be each other's eyes when we're training together, and we're always nitpicking each other's form and trying to, in a cooperative, friendly way, compete with each other to drive each other, egg each other on to get better and to keep growing. So it's really, really cool. And because we're brothers, we have a lot of the same strengths and a lot of the same mechanics. So he's a really good training partner for me for that reason. But we also have certain things. There's some stuff that he's a little bit better at, some stuff that I'm a little bit better at. And it's hard to say how much of that is due to specific practice versus, maybe slight genetic predispositions towards one thing or another.
And like what sources are you learning from? Are you looking at, are you just like skimming through Instagram? Oh, there's a cool new move. Or is there like somebody in particular whose method that I know you have your own certification and everything, but
sure. I mean, I'm always open to learning new stuff, and absolutely, I see stuff on Instagram or various websites, bodybuilding.com, T Nation. I'm always trying to keep up to date with the current stuff and read everyone's articles and try to expand my knowledge through that. So yeah, I read a lot of books. Sometimes I get invited to speak at seminars, and then when I'm there, I get to listen to other people talk. So it's really good. There's a lot of people in the body weight world right now who are doing a lot of good stuff, and I've learned a lot from a lot of them. Mike Fitch from the Animal Flow, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's a buddy of mine. I think he's a great coach. And I don't know how familiar you are with the GMB Fitness, Gold Medal Bodies. I like those guys a lot, and I'm always learning stuff from their articles. And yeah, there's no limit to how much information there is, and I'm open to learning from anybody and everyone. I'm at the park sometimes just working out. Some random person will be doing something. What's that move? And I'll just learn something from them. And they're not a trainer or anybody. They're just some guy at the park working out who offered me a tidbit that was helpful.
Yeah, it's when you go to the park, are you is there like are you talking about like one of these places that you go to and it's not just like a bunch of kids, it's like a bunch of adults on the playground doing stuff? Or are you going to one of those?
In New York, we're really lucky. I live in New York City, and we have a lot of just public playgrounds that, like you said, they're not really kids playgrounds. They're adult outdoor fitness playgrounds. And one such place is Tompkins Square Park. And a lot of my YouTube stuff I filmed over there. Excuse me. And a lot of the photos in my books were taken at Tompkins Park. It's a very photogenic spot. And I also just love training there. And it's got all the essentials, the type of training that I like. And you definitely get an interesting cast of characters coming through there, people from all different walks of life, different fitness backgrounds. And it's just a really cool spot and a really cool community and a cool scene. And there's other cities where it's been growing as well. And the more I travel and I get to see these different places, it's really been a cool experience to be a part of it.
Yeah, when you're going there, is there like some kind of agreement? Yeah, we meet here like 11 o'clock on Sundays, or is it just like always a random thing, or is it like?
Yeah, I mean, I used to run a boot camp at Tompkins Square Park, and I used to do it every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And then when things started getting busier with the certifications and I was traveling a lot, I had to stop doing those. But what I have been doing for the last few years is once or twice every summer, I still do a free meetup out there, and I'll put it on Instagram and Facebook and whatever, and just, all right, this date, I'm going to be at the park for a couple hours, training people, come through. And then whoever wants to come around, I'm happy to work them out, help them out. But other than that, I don't personally have any like set times that I do. But there are other groups of people who I see at that park who are, organizing meetups and things like that. And there's a lot of other trainers who I see training their clients one-on-one over there. So there's definitely a good little community of alternative fitness happening at Tompkins Square Park. And anyone who's in the area who just shows up for a workout, there's always people there training, and it's a pretty friendly community. Everyone's there because they love working out and they love calisthenics. It's not like a gym where you see people who are there because it's like, I got to join the gym because my doctor said I got high blood pressure and I got to force myself to do this, but I hate it. Mm-hmm. People who are going to that park to train are usually pretty serious about training. And there's no one there who's like trying to be seen, like wearing their fancy new workout clothes from Lululemon, like posturing in front of the mirror or whatever. Like there is no mirror there. You're there to train. So that's part of what I love about it. There's no pretension.
Yeah, it is fun to like get around people, and because like maybe you're like one thing I was thinking of like with your like when you're with your brother, and this has happened with my buddy. So maybe I try something and I can't get it, and then I see my buddy get it, and I'm like, oh, and then I get it right after that.
Absolutely.
Some kind of
there's no better motivation than seeing your buddy do the thing you're trying to do, and you're like, that son of a bitch just did it, and then you're just so much more fired up. 100%. And that's something that happens, I'm sure at the kettlebell cert you experience that too. I always see that at the certs I teach. Everyone in the group fires each other up, and everyone starts hitting PRs because once one person sets it off, everyone else, it's demystified. It's like, oh, this guy did that? Maybe it's not so hard. And so much of this stuff is mental. And when you have these self-defeating thoughts like, oh, I can't do that, I'm not strong enough, I'll never do that, it's going to affect your performance. And then when you start changing your thoughts like, oh, I can do that, then that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, there is something about like being maybe there's like some kind of like entry level technique or entry level of some way to like become one of these people. So maybe somebody like getting into calisthenics, they're not able to do everything you can, but they're able to like get something. And then they kind of become part of this group. I remember when I discovered Pavel, and this was going like probably about 9 years ago or something like that. And I started as a trainer in 1999. I quit the business in 2001 because I didn't like what I thought it took to be successful, because I was working at I was an employee at a really successful personal training studio. And it was kind of like, to be really successful, you couldn't be doing the really good stuff. You had to be doing mediocre stuff, because that's where this thing, and actually in my mind anyway, that's where this thing was happening. It's like, if you want to make a lot of money, then do it. If you're mediocre, you're going to appeal to more people. You're not going to be too scary. You're not going to be too, and that's kind of how this place was. It just seemed like mediocre, but as far as business, it was the busiest place in town.
I can completely relate to what you're saying, and that's part of why I wanted to leave. I worked in the Globo gym world a lot longer, but that's part of why I wanted to leave and go independent and do my own thing. Because there's the emphasis is on the wrong things in a lot of those clubs, and it's the reality of the business world. And it happens in every industry. I think when you put making money as the primary goal, then everything else comes second. And I'm a big believer, you put quality and giving people a good service as the primary goal, the money will happen.
Yeah.
But this attitude of, oh, well, let's figure out the money first and forget the product, that'll come second, that maybe leads people to be successful because they're cutting corners and making it up in volume. The gym business, they stay in business because they sell people memberships and hope that the people never show up, right? That's the whole business model. So if you really want to affect change in people's life, selling them a membership and hoping they never come is really not going to do that.
Yeah, there's so many of them. They're around here. I guess they're around everywhere. $10 a month. So It's not really worth it and they'll have like pizza and donuts and stuff on
right.
there. So it's not really worth bothering canceling the membership because it's only $10 a month. But yeah, you're right. That is like really their thing is like, we can just keep selling memberships. We don't have to worry about the place being too full.
That's right. We don't have to worry if half the equipment's broken. No one's using it anyway.
Yeah. And yeah, so I was out of it for a long time. And then I was training like buddies, like friends and friends of friends, martial arts and lifting, like just come over, we'll throw some weights around, we'll do some jujitsu and stuff. I'm not worried about money. And then when I discovered Pavel, it was like I saw this whole other world. And like these people were on like this completely different level. And like the snatch test, 100 snatches with a 53-pound kettlebell in 5 minutes. That was like this. These people in my mind were just like supermen. And I thought, man, if I get back into training professionally, it's only going to be through Pavel's certification. I don't care about any other. And I just kind of like chipped away at it, and I wanted it, but I wasn't really working at it exactly. Or I was working at it, but not planning on
giving it 100%.
Yeah. I mean, it was like what I was mainly doing, but I didn't know that I would get back into training. And then I was seeing this girl for a couple of years, and she really encouraged me to get back into training. She saw how I was training. She's like, you need to get back into it. I was like, okay, well, I'm only going to do it this way. And then, 3 years ago, I got the Strong First certification. And like what I was kind of talking about earlier, like you become like one of these people. It doesn't mean like, yeah, I'm the best or the strongest but it's like, now I'm part of this group that seemed to me before something like unattainable. And so like when people start training with you at first, it's like they're seeing you do all this amazing things, but maybe I'm kind of like,
I think what you're talking about is the beginner's mind.
Yeah.
I think that's such an important thing for trainers to remember what it felt like to not be able to do all this stuff and to look at somebody doing a snatch test or doing whatever else it is and being like, oh my God, that's so unbelievable. Because I think a lot of the reason why, to go back to what we were saying before about how sometimes the best practitioners aren't the best teachers, is because they take for granted how good they are at it. And when they're faced with a beginner, they can't comprehend, why is this person having such a hard time with this thing? Because they've been doing it for so long and doing it at such a high level for so long. So I think it's hugely important for a trainer to have exactly what you described, which is a really vivid memory of what it's like to be on the other side of the equation.
Yeah, you can just kind of like want this thing that seems so unattainable, and then if you just like keep working at it, keep chipping away, then you can like look at yourself and like, oh, I'm actually one of these guys that I was looking up to.
And it makes you realize that everything in life is like that. If you put in the work and you're patient and you're diligent and you want it bad enough, whether it's to pass a snatch test or to do anything you want in life, you can. And those things that you see as, oh, I'll never be able to do that, you start to realize, oh, maybe I'm limiting myself by thinking that way. Maybe I can do that stuff if I just put in the work.
Yeah, when something I actually just saw this morning when I was going through your website, you had the book, and I don't think I'd seen this one before, but was it like Zen
Mind, Strong Body? One of my lesser known books.
Yeah, I don't think I'd heard of that one before until I was scrolling through. Can you tell us, like, what does that mean? Like, what's that book about? And like,
yeah, well, it's about pretty much what we were talking about. It's about the mindset of that beginner's mind, staying focused on those little steps along the way rather than thinking about the end goal. And it's about cultivating a healthy relationship with your body and with exercise that allows you to hopefully sustain, a long practice. Because there's a saying that I'm not sure who the first person to say it was, but it's a great line that consistency is better than intensity. A lot of people will be really gung-ho with a program for a few weeks and then fall off track, and then they're right back where they started, and then they start up again and they're just never making any progress. Whereas if you just chip away little by little and you're consistent over many years, even if the intensity isn't always raised all the way to 10, that little bit adds up over time. And that's a big theme that I'm trying to get across in that book is the journey and the joy that can be found by embracing the journey.
Uh, like, did this like philosophy of yours, did it come?
Uh-oh, might be having a technical difficulty.
Says I'm going to hit pause for just a second. Okay. Can you see me or can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. We're on again, like little technical glitch. So you're talking about the book, the steps.
Yeah, I was talking about the book Zen Mind, Strong Body, which is a book I published a few years ago that's really as much of a philosophy book as it is a fitness book. And it's just about trying to get people to embrace the process and to not be too hung up on goals. And just it presents a different way of thinking about exercise than I think conventional mainstream fitness has given people.
And did you get this like philosophy before? I mean, I know you've been a trainer for a long time and it probably blends together somewhat. But like, how much of your philosophy comes from the training itself? I know for me, I think a lot in metaphors. It's like you can't like do or say anything without me like spinning off into like there's like so much meaning into every little thing, and I can like break down like stuff more and more. It's like how much of this like Zen comes from like it's a chicken and egg thing, but
yeah, no, I've definitely had an interest in philosophy and in Zen Buddhism for a long time. And that interest and my interest in fitness were kind of, I guess, running parallel to each other. And then maybe about, 12 or so years ago, I started to realize that a lot of the tenets from the Zen philosophy really applied to fitness as well. And that's when I started to embrace that connection and started to write about that. And I felt like so much of the fitness industry, and I think this goes back to what we were talking about how a lot of successful fitness brands are not necessarily giving people the best service, is so much of the industry caters to people's fantasies. It caters to this idea of, oh, I'm going to buy a gym membership and poof, I'm going to suddenly lose weight and feel better. And it's all just going to magically happen because I bought this product. And I was really frustrated by how pervasive that kind of marketing was. And that was sort of the impetus for me to start blogging and start writing about this stuff, because I want people to realize, like, look, don't make it about the goal. Make it about doing the thing. And the goal will happen if you do the thing. But if you're just focused on the goal, you just repeat this cycle, like I mentioned before, of starting, falling off, feeling bad, and then repeating and never really getting anywhere.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, the philosophy of the right mindset, starting and like continuing, and
yeah, even if you have a bad day or a bad week, you just do the best you can. Little by little, that adds up. You've seen that the progress is not a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It goes up, it goes down, it spins around, it goes up again, it comes down, and finally, eventually, it ends up at a different place than it started. But it takes a lot of bumps to get there.
Yeah, how do you like minimize your like plateaus? Do you like cycle your training, or how do you do that?
Well, I don't necessarily minimize my plateaus. I've hit plateaus with things over the years, and I embrace the plateau rather than trying to minimize it. And eventually, when you embrace the plateau, you get past it and you have a breakthrough and something clicks. And by not being too hung up on, I have to get to the next step by this date, it actually keeps me healthier and safer and saner. I think sometimes one of the most dangerous things you can do is be too aggressive with your goal setting. You say, oh, I have to hit this goal by this time. And then if you are not on track to hit that goal, you start training more, start maybe stressing out more about it. And ultimately, that's how people wind up getting hurt or overtraining themselves or just burning out completely. So you've got to be very general with your timeline on these things. And you've got to find ways to track progress that maybe are a little bit more sublime. Maybe you didn't add any more reps to your pull-ups. Maybe you didn't add any more time to your handstand, but maybe those reps are a little bit cleaner. Maybe that handstand just felt a little bit more like you really owned it. And those are forms of progress that are much less quantifiable, but no less worthwhile.
Yeah. Like, how much do you think, specializing? So I had Leo Savage was my last guest. He's just all about the mace, and like he'll do some stuff with kettlebells. Sometimes I think he said like 95% of what he does is with a 10 or 15 pound mace, and he's kind of like doing all these movements and flows with it and teaching it. And it's like, that's like part of him. I guess I just say like part of who he is now.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I don't need to be as good with the mace as Leo Savage. I'm assuming you've at least like seen him or know who he is. But
yeah, I've heard of him.
But so like, how much of it is like just like picking a method and not being like, well, I'm trying to be like the deadlift champion. I'm trying to be like this professional ballerina, and I'm trying to do like all these different things. Like, when do you think it's like time to narrow the focus?
I have a couple thoughts on that. The first is that you got to find something you enjoy. So if he really loves the mace and that's what he's passionate about, and clearly that's the case, and he's lucky that he found something that he enjoys that much and that he's that dedicated to and that passionate about, and that's going to keep him focused on the training, because there are many paths toward fitness. As much as I love calisthenics and bodyweight training, I have no problem admitting that it's not the only path. If you like weights better, if you prefer kettlebells, if you prefer maces, do those things instead. I don't care. Do what you like, because at the end of the day, the important thing is that you're getting your heart rate up, that you're sweating, that you're working your muscles, and you could achieve those things with any number of implements or modalities. And that said, if you do something for a while and you find yourself getting bored of it or frustrated with it, and it is fresh to try something else, then switch it up and mix it up. Do mace training for a while, and then if you get burned out on that, do kettlebell training for a while, and then if you get burned on that, do something else, and then you could cycle back around. And I found that the trainers and the practitioners who have the most diverse skill sets and the largest array of things that they're good at are people who just gradually over time acquired new things little by little. So it's not a matter of, I'm going to try to do 50 different things at once. So I'm going to do this one thing for a while. Now I'm going to do this other thing for a while. And over the course of decades, that all adds up.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Like doing like what you like. So you're talking about the people at the gym that they're doing it because they feel like they have to.
That's right.
And so maybe they're almost certainly is going to be something that they like to do, so that they can maybe it's the body weight, or maybe it's the mace, or maybe it's like kettlebell, like you said. So much of it is just, what will you be consistent? What's fun?
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else, it's tennis or something like that.
That's
like
right.
What can be to be consistent. Your consistency quote is good. Let's see. I am just about out of questions where I could keep picking away. I could talk to you about this stuff for all day, but I think we're getting close to about just under an hour here. But is there something that we haven't touched on that you were wanting to get into?
I just wanted to mention, if anyone listening wants to know more about this, that I've got a bunch of books they could check out. We discussed a couple of them. I've also got a book called Get Strong. It's my most recent book that I co-authored with my brother Danny. And this book is really geared toward beginner and intermediate level people. And it provides a template. And for people who aren't really sure where to start or how to progress, this is the book that I would recommend checking out. It's called Get Strong, and it'll help you get strong.
Yeah. Your books and method are all really good. And the other was like that one that I didn't even know about. And so, like, what is there like any last thoughts before I let you go?
Just hey, we're working out. It's been a pleasure.
Cool. Well, thanks again for being on. I'll talk to you for just a second after I stop the recording, and I appreciate you being on. It was good to get to know more about you.
Right on.